Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Jared, and as you can see, the environment is different. That's because I'm not at home. So for this video, because of some reasons, I'm going to be recording from my office. So let's dive right in, and today we'll be talking about Alex Garland's Civil War. So a brief background. Civil War is A24's biggest budgeted film to date, and I think if you watch the movie, it's pretty evident from the cinematography, production design, even the sound and visual effects, which some of this technical craft work I will talk about in slightly more detail later in the video. But yes, it's A24's biggest budgeted movie to date. So Civil War centers around an imagined America, United States, in the near future in sort of a dystopian sense, where it is embroiled in an ongoing civil war. So the president, who is serving his third term in the movie, and whose name we don't know, by the way, is played by Nick Offerman, who I think actually gave a pretty decent performance, even though his screen time in the movie is quite short. So the story of Civil War is told from the perspective of our lead quartet, the four main characters, and who is led by Lee, a seasoned war photojournalist played by Kirsten Dunst, and a young up-and-coming aspirational, actually I'm not very sure which part of her career she's in. She probably just started out, or maybe she's still a trainee. Basically, her name is Jessie and she's played by Kaylee Spaney. So the story follows the four leads as they travel from Brooklyn to Washington, D.C. as the Civil War unravels, and they're trying to get to the president in order to photograph him and interview him before the Western forces, or the aggressors, the antagonizing party, reaches the White House and assassinates the president. So some immediate quick thoughts about this movie. Civil War is by no means a masterpiece, as some people have claimed, both critics and non-critics alike. But even with its flaws and imperfections, I dare say no one, absolutely no one, can categorically say that Civil War is a failure or a flop, because it is a commercial success, a box office success, and in my view, one of the most successful A24 films out there. And we can see even in the social media mentions and share of voice how many people and how robust or even aggressive and intense at times the online commentary and discussion surrounding this movie that's ongoing right now on social media. But I guess in other words, we can all rejoice in the fact that given the success of this movie, since this is once again A24's biggest budgeted movie yet, we can all expect A24 to, from now on, take on more ambitious projects, more controversial projects, and perhaps even explore more genres and variety of movies, not least dystopian sci-fi like Civil War. So to me, Civil War is an incredibly well-made movie, at least from a technical standpoint. So as I mentioned previously, cinematography, sound, even visual effects, and even production design are all commendable in this movie. When you watched Civil War and you take A24 out of the picture, or if you just engross yourself in the movie, you wouldn't walk out of the movie thinking that, oh, it's made by a relatively smaller company. You would just think that you have just finished watching another of the typical blockbuster movies that's produced or financed by one of the major studios out there. But of course, as we dive slightly deeper into the intricacies and the details of the technical work, there are some imperfections. So some of the action sequences in Civil War, they feel pretty staged, somewhat rigid and even robotic, so they don't seem quite realistic as you would expect. And I think that is probably one small but not really jarring issue in Civil War. And the same goes with the editing. So the editing of this movie is pretty solid throughout, but with its pacing sometimes, since editing contributes to the pacing, right? Or rather, editing determines the pacing of the movie, right? So while the editing is overall pretty solid throughout the movie, there are certain places in the film that I feel they can pick up the speed a little. Basically, some moments in the film can be more refined. But in the meantime, I also get it that yes, this is kind of a road trip movie. So, and also given how it is also an action movie, a war movie, so to speak, there are sort of this quick and fast-paced and intense moments, and also in comparison, there will be those slower moments and quieter moments. But I feel overall the film can be tightened up just a little bit. So another great achievement in this movie is the ensemble work. To me, this is an ensemble piece. Of course, there are certain characters that stand out more than the other. Of course, not just in terms of their performances themselves, but also based on their focus and their screen time in the movie. So Kirsten Dunst and Kaylee Spaney, of course, they take up the most attention and screen time in the movie. And to me, both of them gave tremendous performances, and especially a great shout out to Kaylee Spaney, who I think is a rising star. And of course, Kirsten Dunst, very consistent throughout the movie. But as you would know, and especially if you have watched the movie by now, the one singular show-stopping, scene-stealing performance in the movie was Jesse Plemons. My God, that scene. I'm not gonna spoil it, don't worry. So let's talk about some of the stuff that didn't work, or rather, I should say, that didn't work so well in the movie. I feel that some of the characters are not so well developed, one of them being Joel, played by McNamara. He, as compared to the other characters in the film, and if you have watched the movie, you will know what I mean. As compared to the other characters, McNamara's Joel in the movie didn't make any significant or very drastic decisions that propel the story's narrative in any specific direction or change the narrative in any way. But if you take him out, without him, the movie literally wouldn't work. And I feel that we could all know so much more about him, just like how we got to know about Lee and Jesse. So I think Joe's character really took quite a step back in the story and in the movie, and that's quite a pity to me. Another issue I take with the film, and I think this is quite subjective, but I find that some of the dialogue and some of the lines in the movie are so plain and straightforward, so simplistic and simple, they sound as if they are written to be able to be understood by a 3-year-old kid. And one of the examples I can think of is one of the first scenes in the movie where Joel, Lee, and Sammy, played by the incredible Stephen McKinley Henderson, who also appeared in Dune, but not in Dune Part 2, unfortunately. So the three of them in the hotel discussing their plans to get from Brooklyn to Washington eventually. Of course, that plan was revealed by Lee and Joel to Sammy. And they had this chat and discussion about the current affairs, of course, and about the Civil War, of course, and their plan to get from Brooklyn to Washington, D.C. And I thought some of the lines that they said were so plain and simple. Of course, it could be just me, that it didn't sound like how we would normally talk to one another, to our colleagues, to our friends, because it's so black and white and so simple that, you know, when we talk and when we chat with people we already know for quite some time, there are certain slangs or intricacies in how we talk, or some habits in the way we speak, in the way we talk with one another, that probably wouldn't be immediately understood by other people. So I thought the writing is a little bit, I'm not sure. And I would say the screenplay, although of course the screenplay is controversial and many people have their own opinions about it, but I feel that so many scenes in the movie could be developed slightly further. Alex Garland could certainly dig slightly deeper to explore certain things a bit more than the other moments. And one of such moments and scenes was where Kaylee Spaney's character Jessie was changing the film for her camera, and Lee and Jesse shared this conversation. And I thought that conversation, as necessary and as predictable as a movie like this would be to many audiences, this scene could have been much longer, maybe not much longer, but could have been longer so that we all could know more about both of them and the things that they talk about, which I feel are so important to the heart of the movie. And last but not least, and I think this is the biggest pity for this movie, is that Alex Garland, and I'm sure as I say this, Alex Garland did not fully realize his vision or intended message for this movie. I know and I acknowledge and I even agree and I support him for not taking a stand explicitly through this movie, through what he shows and the movie that he's filmed. I get that, but I think he doesn't need to anyway. It's quite clear to me, at least, and I think it's rather idiot proof, that this movie, Alex Garland had meant it to show and to bring out the dehumanization that war and divisions bring about, and it's probably most effective from the eyes of journalists to show that, to show the dehumanization. And of course, the everlasting dilemma that journalism faces between whether to report and show what's happening in real time, what's truly happening in real time, versus the interference that each journalist would want to enter and interfere from their own individualistic human standpoint with emotions and with their own motivations as a human being. So this dilemma and this dehumanization is not explored enough, by Alex Garland in the movie. And by the way, the last scene of the movie, interesting. It's interesting to watch from an entertainment standpoint. I feel it could go much longer. It could be even that an extension of the last scene, this sort of epilogue, where Alex Garland could give some of the characters some lines that would give that biggest tight slap in the audience faces of the message that he wants to bring across with this movie. But Garland did not do that. He chose not to do that, and I feel that's such a waste. So now let's talk about the Oscar chances for Civil War. I say Civil War is kind of 3 nominations kind of movie, and it's all technical. So I think cinematography and sound are pretty likely. Visual effects is probably gonna happen as well. It's of course open for discussion and predictions. Even production design, yes, to an extent. If you see some of the sets, and especially those war sequences, the action sequences, and the segment of the film where they are in Charlottesville, I feel those moments, some of the imagery, not only give the film a chance with cinematography, but also production design as well. Now, acting wise, I wish at least one of the main performers would be nominated, and it could be Kirsten Dunst. And I wanted quite badly for Kaylee Spaney because she really did an amazing job in this movie. But I just feel that Civil War is gonna end up getting 0 acting nominations. In fact, Kaylee Spaney wasn't even my favorite performance in the movie. My favorite performance was by Stephen McKinley Henderson. He was amazing in the movie. And of course, I think many people are gonna ask me, and many people out there would think that Jesse Plemons, with that scene, how he scared the living daylights out of all of us, would earn him a nomination. And I objectively agree with that, but it's just not gonna happen with a movie with so much genre bias to overcome at the Academy Awards. So, nothing else above the line. But interestingly, if Civil War does end up getting nominated for anywhere between 2 to even 5 technical awards, cinematography, visual effects, sound, production design, even editing, it's going to be one of A24's most successful movies at the Academy Awards as far as technical categories are concerned, and it would probably be the first of such occasions since Everything Everywhere All at Once. So yay, we've come to the end of the review, but before I conclude, just a quick wrap up. So Civil War is a far from perfect movie, but still very effective in my view in its technicalities. It's technically very impressive, and even apart from the technical aspects, it's still very effective as a movie to trigger and to start all these conversations online, all this social commentary, and even discussions about politics and current affairs. And of course, this year being the election year certainly adds to that as well. And the success of this movie commercially and in terms of box office and generating share of voice and social media mentions would definitely put A24 in a very good position in the future to be more ambitious and daring with different styles, genres, and yes, probably even bigger budgets in the future. So we can't wait to see what A24 has for us. Of course, there are still numerous issues and flaws and imperfections in the movie with the characters, the writing, some of the action sequences, and of course, the missed opportunities to me was the biggest problem of Civil War. All the wasted potential that could have made Civil War a much better movie than it is. So, in my written review, which I'll link in the description below, and which I really encourage you to check it out, I talked about how Civil War. Okay, maybe I'll just leave you to read it. So, I gave Civil War a solid 7 out of 10 and 3.5 stars on Letterboxd.
Guess what? I'm filming myself again. Well, not because I forgot to say something, but because I thought I did a terrible job giving an outro to this video. It's my fourth video, but I still get a little nervous. I guess the change in environment probably affected me in some ways. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. I am once again linking the blog written version of the review of Civil War in the description below. Be sure to read it and check it out. I talked about certain things that I did not mention in the video. And of course, this video also mentions certain things that I didn't talk about in the blog review, in the blog version of the review. Yep. So for the next video, I'm going to be reviewing The Fall Guy, starring Emily Blunt and Ryan Gosling. I believe by the time this specific video is out, The Fall Guy would have been released in Singapore, and probably I would have already watched it. So yeah. And after following The Fall Guy will be Luca Guadagnino's Challengers, my personal most anticipated movie of 2024 so far. So lots of things happening, lots of great films, lots of exciting films coming up, and if I can, I'll try to do some predictions and yeah, awards coverage soon. So like, comment, subscribe, and of course follow my socials, Letterboxd, Twitter, and check out my blog. And I'll see you next time. Bye bye.